What happens when one individual decides not to shrink, even when all the signs point to them doing so? In a chaotic world, one silent action can change everything. You won't believe how it began or where it went. Press play to get in. Sometimes the most perilous thing you can do in a room of power is simply not to shrink. In a year filled with din, one voice remained constant, peaceful, unwavering. Yet it caused a ripple that no one anticipated. What does one do when someone speaks out, not more loudly, but more clearly? When one speaks truth to power simply, without apology, without permission, where does it take one? Tonight we trace the path of one who didn't seek the limelight, yet refused to turn away when the spotlight shone on her. This is the tale of what is possible when one individual chooses to take her place. It was going to be a straightforward, run-of-the-mill panel on ethics reform. Nothing out of the ordinary, nothing that would give a news story more than a few-day life. The sort of broadcast that features live from the Capitol's smaller chamber, hosted by a pool of journalists from the major networks. You know the sort, something that gets chopped into sound bites for the night news, then is forgotten. But that muggy, sticky Thursday in Washington, D.C., it became anything but forgettable. Millions were watching, and no one, not even the old-school journalists or veteran politicians, saw it coming. It began with one single sentence by Jasmine Crockett. She'd waited patiently for two lengthy, convoluted opening statements. Finally, when it was time for her to speak, she didn't futz with the microphone. No clearing of the throat, no modulation of her voice. She stared straight at President Trump, sitting directly across from her, surrounded by his aides and two senators whose eyes seemed to be straining not to blink. "Mr. President," she started, rock solid as always, "your words regarding urban districts aren't merely reckless. They're pernicious. These aren't talking points for inflaming a base. Residents of my district are observing their communities transform, not due to policy, but out of fear." For a moment, the whole room was silent. Even the technical staff stopped whatever they were working on. Trump slouched a bit in his seat, his expression revealing nothing. Crockett continued, her voice measured and slow. "Each time you utter our elections are riddled with fraud, you're not only attacking a system, you're attacking voters such as mine, blue-collar individuals who look nothing like you, live nothing like you, and are fed up with being treated like ambient noise." Her words lingered in the air, heavy and immovable. And then the unexpected moment happened. Not from a press secretary attempting to spin a mistake. Not from a senator standing nearby. From Trump himself. "Don't speak to me like that," he snapped, his voice increasing. Then, with a resounding crash that was heard throughout the room, he brought down his palm upon the oak table. "Who in the devil's name do you think you are?" The moderator blinked. The cameras recorded it all. 3 angles of the same second. But Crockett? She remained impassive. No blink. And in a voice that chilled the room by 10 degrees, she responded, "Mr. President, with all due respect, the truth does not need your permission." For one beat, all the chaos ground to a halt. No yelling, no rushing, silence. And then all gazes refocused on Trump, now stern-mouthed and scowling. The producers cut to a broad shot, attempting to regain control of the situation, but it was too late. That clip had begun its wildfire trajectory through the social media feeds. First Twitter, then Instagram, then TikTok. A brief clip, just 20 seconds or so, but it resonated. Folks weren't circulating it because it was sensational. Although it was, they were circulating it because it was unusual. A member of Congress had told the president straight truth on national television and didn't waver. Later that evening, political commentator Mark Schell summed it up best on MSNBC. You could see it in her body language. She knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't just talking to the room. She was speaking to millions who have been waiting for someone to say it. The White House attempted to spin it, releasing a vague statement, accusing media framing, and claiming that the president had reacted correctly to a mischaracterization. But the moment had already stuck, and for Crockett, it was not damage, it was momentum. In one night, her followers on Instagram doubled. Her Dallas district office received more than 700 emails within 6 hours, almost all of them plain thank yous. She trended in 4 states. And on Capitol Hill again the following morning, the atmosphere was different. Some legislators skirted her eyes. Others took her aside quietly to say, "Thank you." A few merely said, "You were right." But perhaps the biggest change wasn't within the Capitol. It was out around the nation. By morning, the cable news was on it. CNN had the headline, "Jasmine Crockett confronts Trump head-on." Fox used, "Congresswoman disrespects president in Lvov ethics panel." The sides were drawn. A country already wound up leaned in even more. In Fresno, California, a retired teacher named Linda Mendes sipped her morning coffee, watching the clip on repeat in her kitchen. She said what I've been thinking for years, she told her daughter over the phone. Across the country in Tallahassee, Florida, Marcus Bell, a delivery driver, played the clip for his coworkers during his break. Yo, that lady ain't scared of nothing, someone said. Heads nodded all around. It's not just emotional. It was a shudder throughout the nation. There were those who viewed Crockett's comments as a breath of fresh air. Others believed she'd gone too far. Talk radio lines burst into flames. Internet comment sections filled quickly. Morning show hosts couldn't disagree. Was it courage or disrespect? And all the while, Crockett reported to work as if it were business as usual. There was a cluster of reporters who waited outside in hopes of getting a juicy soundbite. She provided them with one. I said what I said, she said to them, unflappable as ever. My role isn't to make power look good. My role is to tell truth for the people who sent me here, especially if that truth makes folks uncomfortable. Local vendors in Dallas were selling her printed shirts by lunchtime. Crockett's office attempted to hose things down. They genuinely did. But the phrase, the truth doesn't require your permission, had already acquired a life of its own. And although many people were applauding her, not everybody was. Scarcely an hour after the clip hit its stride on the internet, there was a conservative PAC that released a profligatedly edited version of the exchange. Crockett's calm, measured tone was nowhere to be found. In its stead, a rendition that made her appear as though she'd lost her grip. The caption under the video shouted, "Radical left Congresswoman rants at president." And the comments, they were savage. She was called out as being disrespectful, out of control, and embarrassment to Congress. The attacks mounted quickly. Someone posted her private email, and with it came threats, quite enough to lock down her staff. Her security at her Texas district office was increased, and in backroom deals on Capitol Hill, the rumors began. Had she overstepped? Had she jeopardized her political career? Some even hinted she might need to make a humble apology, just enough to grease the wheels. But Crockett, she wasn't having it. 2 days later, she sat down on Good Morning America, right next to host Sarah Owens, and made her position crystal clear. I'm not interested in tiptoeing around the truth just because it makes some people uncomfortable, she said, calm but firm. If this country wants ethics reform, it needs to start with honest conversations, even when they were hard to hear. By then it was clear Crockett wasn't going away, and neither was the public. A Dayton, Ohio 10th grade civics class saw the entire unedited clip played by their teacher, Robin Galen. When it was over, one of them asked, "Why doesn't anybody else speak to the president like that?" Robin couldn't give them a simple answer. And it wasn't even classroom. By Sunday, folks were discussing that moment everywhere. Churches, barbershops, town halls, book clubs. Some called it disrespect. Others recognized it as the type of real leadership they'd been hungry for. And for many, it occasioned a deeper, long-brewing question. What does accountability actually look like when you speak truth to power, particularly as a Black woman, in a system that wasn't designed for your voice to be heard? Political scholars opined. Columnists argued it. Even late-night talkers got into the act. Stephen Colbert quipped, Crockett bludgeoned Trump with the one-liner of the decade, "The truth doesn't require your permission." That ain't a mic drop. That's a mic destruction. Yet amidst all the din, there was one moment that shone through. It occurred at a tiny amphitheater in Tacoma, Washington. During one of the town hall meetings Crockett had been asked to participate in by an activist voting group. During the Q&A session, an elderly woman named Evelyn got up, leaning on a cane in one hand and supporting herself on the mic with the other. "I saw you talk to that man like he was your peer, not your superior, not your fear, your peer. That's the first time I've ever seen something like that in my lifetime." Crockett blinked twice, her Adam's apple bobbing. All she could manage was, "Thank you." As the applause reached a fever pitch in some locations, things backstage in Washington were heating up, and not for her. Across town in the West Wing, things were somber, not haphazard, but close. That sort of tension you don't see in front pages, but you can sense in brusque glances and stampeded memos. By Friday evening, they'd ceased to feign that the clip hadn't gone viral. Senior advisors were into their third round of phone calls with cable news producers, attempting every possible spin they could muster. Passion, presidential toughness, or, as one aide texted off the record, just Trump being Trump. But this time was different. It wasn't merely that he'd lost his temper, something he did often enough. It was the way she had remained calm, and worse for them both, how others reacted to it. At 4:22 p.m. in the Roosevelt Room, a murmured, frantic meeting was in progress. Press Secretary Amanda Ridge, Communications Director Dylan Rhee, Chief of Staff Barry Lang, and the lawyers sat amidst a silence that was anything but serene. "We need a pivot," Amanda said, her gaze fixed on her tablet. "Everybody thinks he got spooked. The longer we let that ride, the more that becomes the narrative." Barry let out a deep breath. She pushed his button. "It happens." "No," Dylan snapped. "It doesn't just happen. It landed." Amanda nodded. "People witness him lose his temper every week. But this time, he appeared threatened. No one said a word. They didn't need to." Meanwhile, down the hallway, Trump was storming back and forth in the Oval Office, brushing off calls from party bosses who only wanted him to let go. He was already seething with rage that pundits at MSNBC were mentioning Crockett's name in the same conversation as potential 2028 contenders. And then there was the coup de grace. A new push poll reported her approval rating among independents had surged 13 points in 2 days. "Nobody," he bellowed to an aide, Nobody gives a darn about those districts, you understand?" The aide said nothing. Trump picked up the remote and turned on ON, hoping for a kinder spin. But even they weren't taking any chances. The words composure and poise kept being mentioned, and not about him. Amanda Ridge downstairs was redrafting the evening press briefing talking points. "We're arguing the president is unyielding in the face of unjust criticism," she said to her aide, pointing to the screen. "Don't use Crockett's name. Stay on ethics. We won't give her an inch more oxygen." But the damage control was not holding. By Saturday morning, there had leaked a leak, audio from within the same room in which Trump had erupted. One of the sound people had recorded everything, including what went down after the cameras cut away. The audio caught Trump mumbling oaths, complaining about uppity showboating and media stunts, terms immediately branded racially charged by the president's critics. Crockett didn't answer back. She didn't need to. Her staff silently made it known that she'd overheard the leak, and in that silence, she made a louder statement than any tweet ever could. Meanwhile, behind the scenes at the Republican National Committee, nerves were frayed. Veteran strategists termed it a messaging debacle. Some huddled and said that Trump's fixation with Crockett was distracting him off message, just when he needed to stay on track leading into the next legislative session. Out on the ground, in Arizona, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, organizers began to hear a new type of question in town halls. Was she going to run for something larger? That was the question beginning to simmer in the water cooler talk, on cable news shows, in neighborhood restaurants, in group chats and Twitter discussions. Meanwhile, back at the White House, Trump wasn't merely irked anymore. He was resolved to take the reins back on the narrative. He summoned a special briefing with some trusted media friends. The mission? Get something up on the table, a piece, an op-ed, perhaps an exclusive interview that reminded everyone who was boss. But when one of them asked whether he wanted to take on Crockett directly, Trump's face set in a scowl. "I don't give her that," he snapped back. "She doesn't get that. She wants attention. She can bark on TikTok." The room fell silent. Even his most loyalists didn't know how to respond to that. Amanda Ridge sat under the table and messaged her deputy in a hushed tone. This could spiral. That evening, as the city drifted into its quiet, Jasmine Crockett was home in her apartment on the southeast side. She sat at her tiny kitchen table, reviewing notes for a speech she'd been asked to deliver at a St. Paul University. Her phone vibrated. Another security notification. Another anonymous threat highlighted by Capitol Police. She looked at the screen for a long moment, then flipped the phone over, face down. Then she did what felt right. She called her mother. "They're going to keep coming for me now," she said, voice low. Her mother didn't even pause. "So let them come. If they're coming, it means you're doing something right." And while Crockett's faith remained firm, the truth was, grace alone was not going to cut it. The weight of the situation was real, and it was bearing down quickly. But here's the thing about Jasmine Crockett. This wasn't unfamiliar ground. Well before she was fighting with a president or going viral on social media, she was just a child in Mesquite, Texas. Her dad worked nights as a bus mechanic, grease between his fingers and long shifts that sometimes didn't end when the sun rose. Her mom, a registered nurse, managed their home with the precision that could compete with any command center. It wasn't elegant, but it was constructed on grit. Her first public speaking experience wasn't on C-SPAN, it was at Mount Olive Baptist Church. She was 9 years old. It was Youth Day, and she stood to read a poem. Her voice trembled. She struggled to get the word perseverance out, but she persevered, head held high. That stuck with her. Politics wasn't in the cards. Law was. And even that route was honed that first year at Prairie View A&M after a professor cut her off in class, dismissed actually, like her opinion didn't count. That evening, she sat in her dorm room, textbook open but unopened. Roommate Denise looked down from the top bunk. You gonna let him shut you up? No, Jasmine said, steady. I'm just figuring out how to make people like that hear me. She graduated in the top third of her class before heading off to law school in Dallas. While classmates pursued clerkships and comfortable internships, Jasmine enrolled to represent tenants who were being evicted, no cause shown. She attended court in hand-me-down suits, pinching heels, car that sometimes refused to start some mornings, but she continued to appear. By her mid-30s within North Texas legal communities, her name was something, meaning not showy, but respected. She was not there to play nice if justice was not being done. Then came the case that changed everything. Arturo Benitez, an established client, phoned her in a panic. His nephew, just 19 years old, had been arrested at a protest. Resisting arrest, they asserted. But cell phone video told another tale. Jasmine accepted the case for free. It didn't simply go away. It sparked a silent fire within the community. By the time she stood for state legislature, her reputation wasn't based on slogans. It was based on showing up, listening, and fighting. She didn't deliver glib speeches. She delivered straight talk, statistics, yes, but with stories behind the figures. Town halls where she allowed people to talk long after their allotted time, no matter how much her staff groaned. When she took her seat in Congress, people thought she'd soften up to get along. But she took that same raw energy to every committee meeting, every policy session. Yet she wasn't impulsive. She was observing, learning, waiting, not for any instant, but for the instant. The instant where her words would be heard, would land. That instant arrived at the round table. Her staff sensed it that morning. She was quieter than usual on the car ride. In the green room, no coffee, no small talk, just elbows on her knees, scrolling through neighborhood crime stats from home. When she looked up, she said it plain. They're not going to like what I'm about to say, but they need to hear it. And they did. What struck so powerfully was not what she said. It was behind it. The courtroom fights, the town meetings, the dossiers jammed into her closet, handwritten labels, evictions, custody, ICE raids. She wasn't reciting theory on national television. She was recounting what she'd experienced. Even her best friends didn't entirely anticipate it. Colin Wexler, with whom she'd partnered on voting rights legislation, would later comment, Jasmine's the type of person who doesn't waste breath. When she speaks, it's coming from a true place. But her detractors, they didn't see the years. They saw only the clip. They saw only the attitude. They saw only the aggression. Her constituents, however, they knew it for what it was, a long, simmering storm now finally making itself heard. In Dallas's District 30, none of this was hypothetical. It was broken sidewalks, buses that never arrived, grocery stores supplanted by dollar stores and liquor stores. It was rumors of voter suppression, purged voter rolls, suddenly relocated precincts. That's what Jasmine Crockett was referring to when she rose at that round table. 2 days after, she returned home. No VIP entrance. She walked directly through Dallas Love Field's main terminal. People took notice. A security guard hunched in and said with a smile, "You rattled him. I don't think he's accustomed to that." Outside her district office building in Oak Cliff, there was a small group waiting. Reporters, neighbors. A woman stood with a sign, "Truth, don't ask permission." And a young boy, shirt creased, eager, approached and asked, "You hiring interns?" She advised the young man at her office, "Bring your resume Monday." He smiled, nodded, and took off like he couldn't wait to tell someone. Inside, phones wouldn't quit ringing. Calls were pouring in from everywhere. Long Beach, Ohio, even Alaska. But it was the local issues that were burdening her team. Her district manager, massaging weary eyes, handed her a list. The Wilmer voter registration office just dropped Saturday hours. Bus line covering 3 low-income communities. Each stopped operating after 7 p.m. 2 polling places closing, budgetary reasons, they claim. Jasmine scanned the paper, then looked up. "I need to see all of these places in person." So that's what she did. No media coverage, no announcement, just Jasmine in a plain car going to each location. First up, the Wilmer voter registration office. The woman behind the front desk held her clipboard like a shield. "I didn't even know you were coming," she stammered, anxious. "That's kind of the point," Jasmine said. Outside, a man signaled her down. Vietnam vet cap, weathered face. "I don't mess with politics," he said. "But that you said? That was true. They treat us like we're dumb. They rely on it," Eamon said. "And they hope you shut up," he said, a half smile cracking through. "Not anymore." At the next stop, a polling station, closed. It had been a middle school. Jasmine gazed at the chain-link fence, the dark windows. Budgetary reasons was the excuse they'd given, but there were still lights burning inside. Custodians still toiled. So why was voting not an option? That question lingered as she walked to Kenny's spot, a bare-bones barbershop that was more like a community center than a place of business. No campaign banners, no speeches, just folks. They shift the polls like we don't even see, an older gentleman said from the barber's room, then complain like it's our fault when people don't show up. They want us weary, Jasmine said. Nah, the barber interjected. They want us invisible. Jasmine took a breath. Well, I've been told I'm a little too visible lately. Laughter, real laughter, but then quiet. A young man, perhaps late 20s, stood up. Just remain visible. My sister wept when she watched that video. Said you made her feel important. That type of silence, silence that comes after truth, filled the space. Jasmine lingered for another hour, listening. That was always her approach. Listen, ask the right questions, pay attention to what wasn't said. But in her office, the atmosphere was dense. On her desk, a fat envelope, Capitol Security. In it, new procedures, red flag threats, a memo warning her off big crowds without cops. Her chief of staff broke the silence. We may have to take it slow. Jasmine didn't respond immediately. She went through the memo, then looked at her staffer. They want us afraid. Yeah, was the response. Because frightened people sit down. Jasmine folded the documents, pushed them into a drawer. Not today. Back in D.C. and on the web, the moment she'd staged would not shut up. That video, it transcended a video. It became a symbol. On the one hand, teachers, nurses, organizers, celebrities, filling the feed with love. The hashtag Jasmine, held the line went viral. On the other, blows, race baiter, loudmouth, attention seeker. Hatred arrived quickly. So did the love. But Jasmine, she didn't say a word. And in some way, that quiet made the moment bigger. On TikTok, Gen Z creators broke down the video. One indicated the second she stopped, allowed the president to interrupt himself. That is strategy, not emotion, the creator said. That's how you take control without yelling at someone. Another layered her words. The truth doesn't require your permission over images of iconic speeches. The fire emoji comments and admiration, but also the questions. Why don't more politicians speak like this? By the morning, artists posted tributes, paintings, digital collages, spoken word over jazz. Jasmine remained committed. She continued visiting websites, continued calling local officials. Asked why she wasn't joining online, she remained straightforward. This isn't about trending, it's about telling the truth. But the wave didn't stop. People started sharing their own stories. A nurse in New Mexico. I've worked in hospitals 15 years, never seen anyone shut down a man like that without raising her voice. That's not just political, that's cultural. And of course, the violence escalated as well. Right-wing media cut together courtroom footage to make her appear crazy, attempted to brand her as anti-police. People weren't having it, though. They'd seen her in real time. Even late-night TV got in on the action. On The Daily View, host Laura Meta joked, "Picture yourself so shaken by a woman simply telling the truth that you hit a table on live television. Sir, just chill out. She's not an Avenger villain. She's a congresswoman." The laughter worked, but the tension remained. And by Monday morning, political consultant Jay Crenshaw spelled it out on a podcast. What we're witnessing isn't merely a media moment. Late Thursday evening, just after 11 p.m., the tale broke wide open once again. This time it wasn't because of a tweet or a television segment. It was from within the White House. It began innocently, a faceless entry in a specialized political discussion board, the sort insiders used when they needed to test something with no traces. The entry asserted that in a closed meeting earlier during the week, top advisors had urged the president to allow the Crockett incident to blow over, but the president wouldn't drop it. He was furious about being made to look weak on camera, the Post said, kept demanding ideas for how to neutralize her, called her disrespectful, dangerous, even a problem we'll handle one way or another. Initially, the Post barely caused waves, but in hours, screenshots proliferated. Reporters pounced. By Friday morning, a major publication had verified that, yes, White House officials had expressed concerns about the president's fixation on Crockett's moment. Suddenly, the script changed. What had been styled as a congresswoman's violation of propriety now appeared to be the tale of an establishment man disturbed by being questioned. The ethics grievance? It began to appear petty. The outrage on the talk shows? Transparent. And in this way, what was intended to marginalize Crockett ended up emboldening her. By Friday night, cable TV discussion panels weren't debating whether she'd crossed a line. They were debating why the president couldn't move on. On Twitter, the hashtag switched from #Jasmine held the line to #Why so shaken. But within the Capitol, tensions cooked. Staffers murmured about what would happen next. Some feared the leak would ratchet up the tensions. Others quietly wished it would put an end to the attacks. And Crockett? She remained steadfast. She read the stories, she watched the coverage, but she didn't rub it in. She didn't take a victory lap. She continued to report for duty, committee hearings, constituent calls, neighborhood walks, because she knew what Farah had told her was true. This institution didn't always punish the most vocal. Sometimes it simply wiped them out. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't going to be wiped out. But the students didn't retreat. Petitions went around. Faculty spoke up. Local newspapers ran op-eds called Let Her Speak. By that week's end, the university gave in. The keynote would be Jasmine Crockett. The evening of the event, the auditorium was filled, not only with students, but with members of the community, activists, journalists, and even a couple of lawmakers who sneaked in unnoticed. Outside, there were hundreds more observing on big screens, wrapped up in sweatshirts against the chilly Minneapolis weather. Crockett arrived on stage without flourish. No entrance music, no grand introduction, just her in a plain charcoal suit, standing at a wooden podium carved with the university seal. She paused for a moment, allowing the space to calm, and then she started. When I was a little girl growing up in Dallas, I learned that power did not necessarily look like you, that the table was not constructed for you, and that if you managed to get a seat at it, you were to sit quietly, smile politely, and be thankful for the crumbs. I was taught this, but I never believed it. Because power doesn't come from a title, it doesn't come from a podium, and it sure doesn't come from someone telling you where you do or don't belong. Power comes from knowing who you are and refusing to let anyone else define it for you. I didn't arrive in Congress to be nice. I didn't arrive in Congress to wait my turn. I arrived to speak the truth. And if that makes some uncomfortable, well, maybe they need to be. When someone tells you to know your place, keep this in mind. Your place is where you decide to stand, where you decide to speak, where you decide to fight for what is right. The silence was so deep that you could hear a cough resonate off the balcony. And then the applause began, hesitant at first, then a ripple that spread throughout the hall, growing and growing until it became a standing ovation that lasted for minutes. They were played in classrooms by teachers. She was quoted from the pulpits by clergy. Even some of her more reserved colleagues in Congress sent her private messages of respect, but not all of them applauded. The reaction against her from some quarters became more ferocious. Threats of censure renewed. Right-wing outlets called her dangerous. Crockett understood what that signified. The tempest wasn't passing. But as she exited the stage that evening, students standing along the aisles touched out, "I love you. Thank you," some of them with tears streaming down their faces. And for the first time in weeks, Jasmine Crockett offered a small, silent smile. If you prefer, I can write what ensues as the political fallout develops. Censure resolutions, supporters emerging, or Crockett's next move. Where she stands now, Crockett has evolved from a freshman congresswoman to a national leader, not by craving publicity, but by remaining resolute in truth, clarity, and service. She's rallied a cross-section of America, from urban activists to rural voters who previously hadn't felt heard. Her live streams every week, filled to the brim town halls, and moments gone viral, have generated a groundswell even critics can't help but notice. When a reporter asked her what the lesson of it all had been, she spoke about neither strategy, nor media, nor Trump. She said one thing: don't ask for permission to do the job they sent you to do. And that was what it amounted to. Crockett had not become viral because she'd raised her voice. She'd gone viral because she hadn't, because she kept cool, spoke the truth, and did not request room. She seized it. For every voter who'd ever felt silenced, for every community organizer who'd been informed to pipe down, for every child who saw a clip and thought, wait, we can speak like that, she gave something back, not a viral moment, a mirror. And in that mirror, people saw not just her, but themselves. So if you're watching this and you've ever felt too small to speak up, remember this: truth doesn't ask for permission, and neither should you. Subscribe to the channel for more real stories that matter. And if this one moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it.